Good evening. How you guys doing tonight? It's nice to see so many guys come out here on a Saturday night when everybody's got, I'm sure everybody's got plenty to do. So to get a bunch of men out to hear about what we've got going on here in our community, what FCA's got going on, and what Rick Horton has to say on a Saturday night, that's no small thing. So I appreciate that. Also, I'd like to thank Parkland Chapel for hosting this event. Parkland Chapel's hosting the event, and also FCA for sponsoring the event as well. I appreciate that. But before we get started tonight, I would like for Brett Burgess to come up here if you would and open us in prayer tonight. Thank you.
Hey, let's bow our heads and go to the good Lord here. Father, we just thank you for this Saturday night, for the sunshine, for all of us to come out and to hear something good, but not just about a man of great athleticism, but also about a great God that he serves. I pray that the message that will be given tonight will be received well, and we'll all enjoy what Rick has to say. I think just for the kids that come out tonight, you know, as we walk through this world, Lord, we're looking for men of integrity. And I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of Man Up and trying to raise a flag for you, Lord. We thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for our wives and our daughters that are at home tonight or wherever they may be. Thanks for allowing just a little man time here. Thank you for all that you do. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
A few housekeeping things here before we get started. One thing I want to mention is out in the foyer, as I said, FCA is a sponsor of this event as well. We have Man Up t-shirts out there. If you'd like a Man Up t-shirt, if you would, make a donation to FCA, because FCA is doing wonderful things in our public schools, and you'll hear about that in just a little bit. So if you'd like to get a t-shirt out there, feel free to grab one, make a donation to FCA. There's a white box out here. You'll see it hanging on the wall. That's where you would put that. And if you need to write a check for that, then just make it out to FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So that's one thing. As well, there will be information about FCA out here on the table. And on this counter over here by the coffee cups, they'll talk a little bit more about that, talking about how you can support FCA. And after they're done presenting a little bit here at the beginning, you guys will know why that's a worthy organization. Fellowship of Christian Athletes, for those of you who don't know, Fellowship of Christian Athletes is one of the few Christian organizations in our public schools. So what we're going to do tonight here, how this is going to work after I get done talking here in just a second, FCA is going to come up and they're going to present, show you a little bit about what's going on in the schools with FCA. And you wonder why FCA? Well, Rick Horton, Rick Horton FCA, the connection there is Rick is also, he's one of the main spokesmen for FCA. So he goes around talking on behalf of FCA and rounding up support. So we had asked Rick to come in here and say, and really challenge men to team up with Man Up, to come into our community and challenge men to step up and be the men that God's called them to be. And you're all here on a Saturday night, so I guess you would agree that that's probably pretty important, that men do need to be challenged and they need to be equipped. And they need to be encouraged to go out and be the men that they're supposed to be. So we have Rick coming in. It's kind of twofold. He supports FCA, and he's also coming in here to challenge you men that are here tonight. So he'll be here tonight. So that's how it's going to go. FCA is going to come up here in just a few minutes. And then we're going to have worship. Our worship team from Parkland Chapel is going to lead worship. And then Brett's going to introduce Rick Horton. He's going to come up here and speak. And that's pretty much it for the night. Before we get started, though, I'd like to talk for just a second about Man Up. What is Man Up? This is a Man Up event. We do several things with Man Up. But Man Up is a Christian men's organization here locally. And we meet once a month. And we generally have Bible studies or book studies, Christian book studies. And we get involved in our community. We're always looking to get involved in our community for different causes to where people will see strong Christian men standing up and doing what's right and being an example for these younger men. I work in a public school system. For those of you who don't know me, that's what I do. I work in a public school system. I've been a coach, a teacher, and now I'm an assistant principal. And, I see it all the time. A lot of our families in our community and really nationwide are broken families. We have a lot of boys and girls growing up without two parents at home. And that's really detrimental to these boys. A lot of times these boys are growing up with no male role model in their house. And, I see it over and over again. I deal with discipline now to middle school. As you can imagine, that keeps me really busy, dealing with discipline in a middle school. And that discipline I deal with, about 80% of that is from boys. And out of those discipline referrals that I deal with to these boys, the numbers are astronomical. How many of these boys don't have a strong male role model? Somebody to guide them and teach them and show them what it's like to be a man of integrity. So that's why Man Up is important. You know, we want to make sure that we're encouraging men to go out there and not just be those men in their families. You know, that's important that you be that man in your family, but also to be that strong role model, that male Christian role model for all these different kids that you can get involved with in the community, whether it be through youth programs, baseball programs, whatever it is you enjoy, hunting, fishing, whatever. So we're always looking to team up and get involved in stuff like that. For instance, we have a Man Up youth hunt. Jason Samples is sitting right there. Jason, raise your hand, please. Okay, Jason puts on every year, he puts on a Man Up youth hunt, you know, and generally they don't kill any deer, okay? But these boys hear a lot about Jesus. They go out and they sit in the woods. They eat good food. And this year they actually did kill some deer, didn't they? How many deer did you guys get this year? That's pretty amazing. That's 3 more than they've ever gotten. So it's an amazing thing. But you know, these kids, you've killed 3 deer. How many kids have been saved as a result of that Man Up youth hunt? Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, there's such a need there. And I don't know, maybe, you know, we get blinded by the busyness of our own life, our own jobs. And we really don't think about that. You know, you just see what's right there in front of you and your own family, and we focus on that. But there's such a bigger need. I mean, if we really want to see change in our community, if we want to see change around us, we have to step up and we have to take on more responsibility. And we have to be that role model for others. And, you know, it's funny, as I look around this room, there's people in this room who really shaped my life. So it's an amazing thing. There's been a lot of strong male Christian role models in my own life before I was willing to hear all of it and really live it. But I had those people living a life before me that meant something to me. So, and it shaped my life because I was one of those kids that didn't have that at home myself. We get involved in a lot of different things, as I was saying. We also did the wood for people who needed it. Called it Wood for Widows. It turned out to be wood for anybody that needed firewood for the winter. And we did a lot of wood cutting and stacking and delivering and stuff like that. But we also have a monthly Bible study, as I said. And we get involved in things like this, where we team up to bring people in here to come in and encourage you and challenge you to step up. So these are the things we do with Man Up. Again, we meet every month. Second Saturday of every month, we meet at the Valley Creek Coffee House here in Farmington. And that's at 8 o'clock in the morning. We go from 8 till about 9:15 the second Saturday of every month. So if you guys would like to be part of that, we'd like to have you there. We've been studying a book here that we're about to finish, and we're about to start a new study. This is a book. Looks pretty interesting. It's got a guy with his hands all taped up. You know, that guy's a fighter. Okay, and this is called Fight, Winning the Battles That Matter Most. And what's funny about this book was actually brought to my attention by a guy that I coached with who didn't know the Lord at all for many, many years. And then right before he resigned at Farmington to take a job in Kansas City, he started coming to church and got saved, moves to Kansas City. And the next time I hear from him, he's letting me know that, hey, in your Man Up group, I have a book you need to study. And this is Coach Vaughn, Todd Vaughn, that was the head coach here at Farmington. He said, we're studying this book called Fight, and you really need to take a look at it for your men's Bible study. And I said, well, I'll do that. And I get a lot of stuff recommended to us for study, and took a look at this, but he was right. It's a terrific book. The guy who wrote this does a great job. So we're going to start that probably in May, but we're finishing up the other book now. You don't have to have read the book before you come. Trust me. We cover the chapter when you come, and we elaborate on it and we discuss it. And so we do that second Saturday of every month. Finally, what I want to talk about is how's Man Up related to FCA? Okay, actually, Man Up started as an FCA coaches huddle. We started with a few coaches who wanted to get together because we talked about our influence as coaches in our community. And I was a football coach, coached a little bit of baseball, and we got together, several of us coaches in the community, and said, we ought to come together and have a men's Bible study for coaches. And we started doing that, but eventually what happened was that we had more men at this FCA coaches huddle who didn't coach, who were just men from the community who wanted to be part of this Bible study, and then it grew into Man Up. So that's how it started. So we had that connection with FCA, and that's how we advertised everything was through FCA. So then it just grew, and we became Man Up instead of the FCA Coaches Huddle. But we have that strong connection with FCA. FCA is a wonderful organization. It's one of very few Christian organizations in public schools, and they do a wonderful job. So with that, what I'm going to do now is introduce Tom Dixon to you. And Tom's going to come up and talk a little bit about FCA, and then he's going to bring some local FCA guys up here to talk to you a little bit. So hope you enjoy your night.
Thanks, Todd. We really appreciate the opportunity to kind of team up with Man Up and be here tonight. Like Todd said, Man Up started as an FCA coaches huddle, and really what it's turned into is pretty much a community huddle for men. So we're really glad to be here. We thank Todd for organizing the event and for kind of being our contact. We also thank Brett Burgess, who we met Brett about a year ago, and it's kind of an interesting story. We were visiting some schools in St. Genevieve and here in Farmington, and we needed to find somebody, a local contact, that could help us set up a kind of a lunch meeting. Rick Horton, who you'll hear speak here in a little bit, and as Todd mentioned, Rick is the multi-area director for FCA in St. Louis. And anyway, I called Sheriff Gary Stolzer in St. Genevieve. I know Gary, not because I've been in his jail or anything, but know Gary through some business dealings we have with him. And he told me that the guy to call to organize that luncheon he said, a guy named Brett Burgess. And he said, you'll talk to Brett for 10 minutes on the phone and you'll feel like you've been to church. And I thought, well, that's the kind of guy that I want to talk to and need to talk to and enjoy talking with. So Brett told me immediately that he would help us do that, and he said, give me the date and how many people you want to be there. And I said, well, it was a last minute thing. We had a couple weeks advance notice. So Brett said, how many guys do you want there, or women? And I said, well, if we could get 5, maybe 8 to 10, that'd be great. So he said, let me see what I can do. I'll call you tomorrow and kind of let you know. So he called and said, hey, I think I can get 10 to 15 people there. We were trying to get Christian business leaders from the area, community leaders that have faith, to come so we could kind of share the ministry with them. And so I said, that'd be wonderful. If you can get 15, that's great. So he called back the next day and said, I can get probably 20 or 25. And I said, well, we have a budget for lunch. And he said, don't worry about that. I'll cover whatever you guys can. Well, make a long story short, we had about probably 35, 40 people there. And Brett just really pulled himself out for us, and saw the benefit of FCA. And as Todd said, we're a student-led organization, so we can be in our public schools. And I think all of you understand the need for that, especially now more than ever. But I am on the board of directors for the Ozark Gateway Area FCA. We are one of 4 separate geographic areas that make up the greater St. Louis area FCA. We have one of my fellow board members here, Dr. Dennis Robinson, one of your own right here from Farmington. And it's just he's a wonderful Christian man, and it's just an honor to serve with him on our board. What is FCA? Many of you may have a background in FCA. Maybe you participated in FCA when you were in high school, played a high school sport. Maybe you have a son or daughter that was involved, either now or in the past. But because we're limited on time, maybe I'll just share our vision with you. And the vision is to see the world influenced for Christ through the influence of coaches and athletes. So that's kind of the general vision that we have. And then, probably there are a half dozen 2-word phrases that I can kind of tell you that really kind of sum it up. The first is that we are Christ-centered. Next, we are a sports-oriented ministry. We are multi-denominational. We are coach-sponsored. We are student-led, and we're volunteer-driven. So that kind of tells you what we're about. Here in the Ozark Gateway area, we have, there are 45 high school and middle school campuses that we could potentially serve. Right now, we serve 31 of those schools. And when we say we serve them, that means that we have a student-led Bible study discussion group. We call them huddles. So our ministry plan is to have a huddle in 100% of our schools. So that's our objective. And that's kind of our goal. That's our ministry plan. That's what we want to accomplish here just as soon as possible. And we know that God has a great plan, and He's going to help us accomplish that. There is a financial aspect to FCA and to our ministry. As a local board, we're responsible for funding our area, and it costs right at $3,000 annually to fund each huddle in our area. So you can do the math and see that we have a fairly significant budget in order to serve our area. How do we do that? We have 2 major fundraisers each year. We have a dinner auction. We have that in Arnold. We have a 7-county area, so it's kind of difficult because of the widespread area we cover that for people to come. So we have a dinner auction in Arnold. That's coming up on February 28th. And we've got some flyers outside. If you're interested, Andy Bennis, former Cardinal pitcher, is going to be our featured speaker. Rick Horton is going to be our MC, and it's going to be a great event. We've got a lot of great autographed Cardinal merchandise items, balls, bats, hats, bats, jerseys, you name it. But it's going to be it's at First Baptist Church of Arnold, 6:30 to 9 on February 28th. Tickets are $75 each, or a table of 8 is $500. And then in the fall, we have a golf tournament in Washington, Missouri at Franklin County Country Club, and it's in October. The other way that we raise funds for our area is we come to events like this, and we reach out to the local community, business leaders, individuals, and there's several opportunities on how you can do that. We have, I think tonight we're going to offer an opportunity for you to make a contribution to us here. If you want to think about it and pray about it, we have some other cards out there. We call them home team contribution cards. You can take it and look at it and fill it out and mail it in with a check, or you can go online to stlfca.org. That's the website for the Greater St. Louis FCA, and just open the Ozark Gateway page, and actually there's information on there about our dinner auction and also about how to give, and you can even get set up to give monthly. We've got a great ministry. We have a passion for what we're doing. We want to impact these young men and women for Christ, and a majority of these kids that we're ministering to aren't in a church. This is the first time they've been exposed to the gospel. So we have a chance, guys, to change lives, to lead a lot of young people to a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's priceless. So I'm going to introduce you to Kevin Bowers. He's our area director, and what we do at these events is, you can hear me talk, I'm a board member, but to see the actual ministry in action, you really need to hear from some of the coaches, and the coaches are the key to the ministry. And we have to have good, solid coaches in our schools. And so the coaches and the students are critical to the ministry, and we like to have them get up and just kind of talk a little bit about their experience with the FCA ministry and how it's impacted their lives. But before I turn it over to Kevin, I want you all to know that I have been praying for every man in this room before this event. Man Up is a great ministry, and we have to change things, and the only way we can do it is really through our faith and through a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And so we support what they're doing. They're great guys, and I have prayed every day for the past couple of weeks that every one of us here tonight will hear something, we will learn something that will draw us closer to the Lord, that will just improve that relationship that we have with Him, that will make us really man up men. And I think that's what it's all about. So thanks again, Todd, for the opportunity to be here tonight. You're going to hear a great speaker tonight. Rick he's on fire for the Lord, and we all know him as a Cardinal voice of the Cardinals, but his real passion and love is FCA, and he's going to share that with you tonight. So I'm going to pass it on to Kevin, and he's got 3 coaches from the area that going to tell you a little bit about what it's like to be a huddle coach for FCA. Thank you. One more thing, if you all can fill out one of these yellow cards, it's an information card. Before you leave, we would appreciate it. What's going on with FCA?
I'll stand up a little bit here. My name is Kevin Bowers. I'm the area representative, area director for the Ozark Gateway FCA. Tom told you that. The 7 counties that we serve, that we work in, are Jefferson County, St. Genevieve, St. Francis, Washington, Crawford, Franklin, Gasconade. So like Tom said, we have a wide area. In those 31 active schools, there are 39 active huddle coaches. And we couldn't have a huddle without a huddle coach. Okay, we have to have someone there on that campus that wants to basically sponsor them. And then we also need the student athletes who want to be a part of that. Up here tonight, we have 3 gentlemen who are currently serving as huddle coaches in their area. And in the schools that we have that are close to this area, if I can remember them, we'll start with St. Genevieve High School has an active huddle. Farmington High School does. St. Paul Lutheran High School does. Potosi, North County, West County, Bismarck, and Central. So those are the ones closest to your area that are active huddles. This is Charlie Causey. And Charlie Causey started teaching at Monroe City. Anybody know where that is? Yeah, the only thing I know about Monroe City is a friend of mine married a girl there. It lasted about 6 months. She came and took her brother and wiped him out. So that's all I know about Monroe City. Charlie went there to Potosi, where he was there about 27 years. Is that correct? Coached football, coached track. He is now currently a teacher. He retired in public school district. He's now at St. Paul Lutheran here in Farmington. They just moved into their new building up the road here. And Charlie is coaching middle school football for Farmington High School, and he's going to coach track again this year. He's been married to his wife for
9 years.
9 years. And Charlie is a avid hunter, fisherman, rides horses. He's a basketball official, and he's been doing that about 24 years, I think. And he said one of his other hobbies is he loves reading the best book ever written, which I'm assuming is
The Bible.
there you go, the Bible. I was hoping he'd say that. But Greg Noble, I'll introduce him next. Greg's from Park Hills Central. I still call it Park Hills Central. And Greg has been teaching for 19 years. And Greg has coached 3 sports at one time, football, basketball, and baseball. I had the pleasure of doing FCA baseball camp with Greg for many years in Cuba, Missouri. We used to have an FCA camp and got to know Greg there. Him and Brian Wallen would come down and we'd do baseball camp. And they'd bring young men from this area, and we'd just have a great time doing baseball camp. They're learning about baseball and God, right, Greg? Greg does a great job with his huddle. Now, we were talking earlier back there together, and Greg actually thinks he remembers Charlie refereeing one of his basketball games. And when I said, Charlie said the best book ever written, he likes reading that, and that's the Bible. And Greg said, well, I knew he wasn't going to say the basketball rules book because he's clueless on that. But he's still doing it for 24 years, so you kind of know what I think about officials sometimes. Technical. So next we have Brian Jones at North County High School, and Brian's a little nervous, I think. He told me he was. This is not his cup of tea, which I understand. Brian would rather be out on the river fishing, which I would be too, or hunting deer. Brian's been married, how many? 20 years in April. 20 years in April, very good. He has 2 daughters that just went and did the hunter safety course today. I said he should have been out fishing, but he did that with his daughters. Brian is at North County. He's an industrial arts teacher. He has coached football and baseball there, correct? Just football. He was football coach there. He's now the huddle coach. So a little bit about Brian. Brian shot a big, huge deer this year, and I said, Brian, where'd you shoot that thing? In the woods. I said, in the woods in Missouri. I said, okay. So then we got to talking about fishing. He's a big smallmouth fisherman. I said, so where do you catch these smallmouth? He says, on the river. Okay. Well, the Merrimack River. That's still pretty big. I said, really? I said, yeah, by a root wad. So you're not going to get much out of Brian. He's not going to tell you where he's shooting those big deer or catching them big smallmouth. But he'll talk it, but he won't tell you. But that's okay. I appreciate that about him. So anyway, I got a few questions for these guys. We just want to let you know about Fellowship of Christian Athletes and what happens on campuses. And first, Charlie, just tell us a little about how you got involved in FCA.
Well, I was teaching at Potosi High School, and I think Coach Noble had his chapter going, and I thought it would be a good idea to do it at Potosi. I think, without a doubt, folks, one of the greatest things that any person can do, whether it be a coach or an athlete, is give their heart to Jesus Christ. And I just want to try to make a positive influence into the kids that were coming to school there. Sometimes Potosi gets a bad rap, but, it is a good school system. Coach is over there laughing already. And it's a great school system. I was there for 27 years, and I think we had the chapter there for 15 years when I left, and we had some fifth quarter stuff after football games. We would have meetings sometimes once a week, every other week in my classroom. And, we're not supposed to lead in public school. And probably the greatest compliment I got one time was from a teacher who put a note in my mailbox and said, by law, you're not supposed to be leading this, are you? Well, anyway, I had a few comments to make along the way. And but anyway, I think it's a good influence for the kids. I think that probably one of the greatest influence I had in my life was a high school football coach. His name was David Oakes at Hillsborough High School. And he was a hunter, and he was a Christian man, and he was also Coach of the Year in 3 different states. And I got an opportunity to go to Mississippi and see him inducted into the Mississippi Hall of Fame. But we still keep in contact to this day. And that's the kind of influence that I wanted to have with athletes. And that's the kind of influence I think that was important. And so this is basically how I got started with FCA.
Very good. And before we go on there with Brian and Greg, Todd hit it, and I think Brett said something too, and then Charlie said it, the word influence. Billy Graham said that a coach has the opportunity to influence more people in 1 year than most people will in a lifetime. Now think of that. You guys think about the coaches you had. Charlie just told you about a coach that meant a lot to him. All of us can think of that if we played any sport, no matter what level it was. But a coach has that ability to influence more people in 1 year. Think about that. As either a teacher or a coach. And these guys are stepping up and trying to do that, and I commend them for that. And so, Greg, you go next. You guys got a microphone there. How'd you get involved in FCA?
I actually I started teaching 19 years ago, and my first year as a teacher, Chuck Hasty, who some people here might know, he's the superintendent at Bismarck now. He was a teacher at Central, and he had been doing the FCA, and he was getting ready to go into administration, and he asked me if this is something that I would like to do, and I said absolutely. So 19 years ago, I started with FCA, and it's changed my life just as a man and as a coach and as a teacher. And I know that it's changed a lot of students that have been affiliated with FCA. But I know one of the things that happened with us was when we first started, the first couple of years that we did that, that's when I first had the opportunity to meet Rick, who you're going to hear from later. And he's just an amazing man, good, solid Christian man. And he came down and really helped us kind of get things started. The FCA had just gotten started at Central a couple of years before I got there, so we hadn't been going very long. And so 19 years ago, he started coming to our fifth quarters 2 or 3 years in a row, and he played basketball with our kids all night. This is a guy who has lots of responsibilities and lots of other things he could be doing on a Friday night, but he drove all the way down to tiny little Park Hills, Missouri, and played basketball with our kids all night and ate pizza with them and talked to them and talked about Christ and showed them that love. And I have kids today even that still have contact and ask about Rick a lot and ask how he's doing. And for a guy who could be doing a lot of other things to be spending that kind of time with our kids was pretty awesome. But FCA has been a great blessing for our students and for our teachers and coaches who've been involved over the years. And it's a wonderful organization.
Thanks, Greg. Brian, how about you?
Our FCA huddle is kind of in its infancy. We started in 2011. A couple of local pastors, Gary and Jane Stabenow, had actually approached the guy that I coached for at the time, Jeremy McDowell, about possibly being a huddle coach, and he relayed it to me, and I thought, boy, that's a really good idea for somebody else to be a part of. So at the time, we were kind of struggling football-wise, and Jeremy, there was some uncertainty as what his future held at North County, and he was not really wanting to take that on at the time. Plus, he had young twins, and his wife was pregnant with their third child, so they were going to have, I think, 3 kids under 2 years old, which, as all you know as parents, that's quite a handful in itself. So I didn't think a whole lot about it at the time. A couple of months later, the lady that used to represent us before Kevin, Whitney Arthur, she came by one day and just said, hey, I heard you guys were interested in FCA. I thought I'd leave some stuff with you. So it kind of planted the seed with me. And she left the huddle binder and some other information. I went through it, and I knew a little bit about what FCA was from participating in the coaches huddle that Todd had started, but I didn't really know a lot about it. So I started looking through that, and I guess, talks in the Bible about seed being planted. I guess what Whitney did that day was kind of planted some seeds. So the more I looked at it, the more interested I got in possibly being the huddle coach. I talked to Todd about it, and what Todd had told me was really encouraging. So in the spring of 2012, I kind of committed to being a huddle coach at North County. Well, what I didn't realize is the legal side of it, as far as the school boards having to vote on it and one thing and another. So once we got all that worked out, it was the fall of 2013, which is when we actually held our first FCA meeting at North County. We had a lot of participation early on. We also had a lot of seniors, so they were able to get to our meetings of a morning because they had their own transportation. Last year, we started by meeting once a month, had enough participation and interest that we went to 2 times a month, and we met 2 times a month throughout the rest of the school year. One thing Todd told me when I got started was he said, the one thing one person that's going to visit you right off the bat when you get this going is the devil. Well, I think through that course of January and February last year, we had about 4 or 5 FCA days meetings that were canceled due to the snow days. So like I've always told my girls, I'm not a big fan of missing school because of snow. Snow days are the devil. But we ended the year on a good note, come into this year with a couple of good young huddle leaders. The problem we're having now at North County is we graduated a lot of seniors, and our huddle group now consists of a lot of underclassmen. So they have a hard time getting to the meetings before school, and we're struggling with that. But the interest of those that are there is still really good, and they're excited about what the future holds.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think all these guys, they have great huddles. I go to the one at Farmington in the morning, 7 in the morning. What I like about it, I don't know if Brian got it going or not, but they have sausage, biscuit sandwiches, and some jelly and biscuits, and I like to hit that when I can. All right, we have time for one quick question for one more of you. I would like you guys to just share what's been one of the most meaningful times with FCA, either personally for you or with one of your huddles.
I think probably the greatest single thing that comes to mind is I had a young athlete by the name of Gary Greenlee who played for me at Potosi when I was a head football coach, and he grew and developed and made himself into a really good senior player. And then he's also a good Christian young man and has a praise band very excellent praise band. Matter of fact, Gary also was a runner-up in Nashville, Tennessee for a single gospel singer. But anyway, we had a fifth quarter, and I asked Gary, I said, could your band come and play? And they did an awesome job after the football game, and Gary had an invitation to the kids that were there, and we had several kids come up and gave their life to Christ at that moment. And just those kinds of influences that you have, and seeing a former athlete and seeing him out there leading that was just one of my greater moments. But angels in heaven are rejoicing anytime someone gives their life to Christ, and that's exactly what it's all about. So that's probably it.
Greg?
Real quick, I think in FCA, one of the things that all these guys will tell you is that it seems like things like this happen all the time. There's always something pretty awesome happening with students. But probably one of the best things I can think of is we had a former student who, when he was in high school, he attended FCA nominally. Sometimes he was there, sometimes he wasn't. He was a really good athlete, pretty good student, but not a real good kid, to be honest with you. He was into a lot of things he shouldn't have been into, and gotten in a lot of illegal trouble when he first got out of high school, but gave his life to Christ early on. And he talked a lot with me about FCA, and how even though you talk about seeds being planted, that was happening with him with FCA, that even though he didn't have a father figure at home, we talking about that, we didn't have a lot of positive influences in his life, but FCA was something that he came to. And even though I didn't really understand that he was paying a lot of attention, apparently he was. But he gave his life to the Lord, and he actually was our fifth quarter speaker last year. So here he is. He's 23 years old. He comes back, and now he's basically preaching to our kids at FCA meetings, and has totally changed his life. And actually, this year our speaker was a young man from Potosi who was a very similar kind of athlete and student. Yeah, Dylan Wyrick, absolutely. And Dylan came, and he was our guest speaker this year. So we're seeing kids that were impacted by FCA, and kids that didn't have that Christian influence growing up, and yet now they're men of God, and they're changing their lives, and now they're coming back and pouring into students. And to see that kind of thing happening with FCA is just it's phenomenal. It's been great.
One of the things that's unique to the St. Louis chapter of FCA is that they provide the huddle coaches in the huddles with a binder with lessons in it. And one of them that was really powerful at one of our huddles this past spring was servant leadership. And it's something that I didn't know a lot about when I got into coaching, but through various trials and bad seasons and just different things you encounter, you sure get a humble heart. And the key, or the focus of this Bible study was how Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, and the importance of what that meant as being the greatest of greats, submitting himself to serve the guys that normally serve him. And of course, we know now that was just setting up for what was going to take place in his life later on. But it really, two people come to mind while I was preparing for that lesson, and one of them was Joe Ehrman, the guy that's the Season of Life book is based off of, who was a Baltimore Colt. And one of the things that he really drove home in the Season of Life book was being other-centered. And the last few years I coached, I tried to be more other-centered than self-centered. And I don't know that I was any better of a coach, but I know that the relationships I built during those years were more meaningful. And it was more because of my heart and not the kids' heart. Another thing that they talked, or that come out in that lesson, was humility. And another quote that stuck out with me that I had read prior to that was a guy named Rich Donnelly, who was a career assistant baseball coach, and he always talked about one of the quotes that he said was, "There's two types of people in the world: those that are humbled and those that are about to be." And I could sure testify to the second part of that, because there were several times that I in my early years as coaching especially, that I surely got humbled, and it's because of that, I think it helped me the last few years.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Charlie. To wrap this up, again, Tom mentioned it, really, FCA is aimed at athletes. We're Bible-based, we're Christ-centered, we're student-led. Just what Brian was talking about, a lesson there is student-led. We train student athletes to be leaders on their campus. We pour into these guys, hopefully. They pour into the officers, their leaders. Their leaders pour into the rest of the school there, the campus. And this is what happens in an FCA meeting on campuses all around this area. The other part that I want you to know is in the mission of FCA, it talks about having a relationship with the church, and that's what this has become. You guys started off as an FCA huddle, and now we've grown out into this church thing, and that's really a neat thing about it. Again, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate that very much. You guys can hear me. That's good. What a joy it was to be a part of the last half hour sitting back there. The worship songs were great. I love hearing from coaches, too. I mean, I absolutely love hearing coaches talking about real-life stuff that they're dealing with, and just grateful that I've had a chance to be a part of this. I got to tell you, I did bring Charlie's favorite book, the Bible, and I'm going to get to that in a bit. I was paying attention to you always pay attention to the coach, don't you? I mean, the coach says something, you listen. But I got to cover a couple baseball things first. You know what the number 12 is. That's how many days till the pitchers and catchers report to spring training. So we can stop talking about snow, start talking about baseball again, and it seems to be a not just the St. Louis, but a greater St. Louis, Missouri thing to do to talk baseball in the summer. It's our way of life. It's our pastime. It's what kind of we talk about. And I know Kevin alluded to hunting and fishing a lot. He's trying to get scoop from Brian about where to go. I get that. I understand that deal. I'm not what I hunt is Titleists that are either hooked into the woods or pushed into the lake. But that's my hunting. But when you're around people in sport, you kind of get each other, don't you? I mean, it's just something that I understand those stories. You understand the kind of when Brian was talking about being humbled. I mean, when I think about being humbled, it always comes back to sports for me. I mean, I've been humbled many times. I mean, I have. And the worst of which is a long story, which I won't tell tonight. When I asked my wife to marry me, she said no. Okay? Now, she's my wife of 32 years now, so I'm smart enough not to give up. You know, they can't say no 11 times or whatever they teach in sales training. But I just kept after that, and in reality, and I won finally. And grateful the fact that I finally kind of changed her mind on that. But interesting enough, she says that and I want you to think about this as I'm going through this. We're going to talk about some baseball stories, but think about how humbling that moment was for me. She said to me later that she said no to me because she said I was publicly talking about how I was an atheist and an agnostic, and that bothered her. That's why she said no. Now, she was not a Christian. It just bothered her that I wasn't. Okay, think about that. I mean, doesn't seem fair. Okay, but as we know when we talk with our wives and our daughters and our moms, and fairness and logic doesn't always win the day. But I will tell you that was important to her. So what you all are doing here with this in Man Up is a need in this world, as Brett said. Todd has said it. Tom said it very well as well. I mean, this is needed in this community, in our world, in our culture. I mean, men need to be men. And when I was younger, I mistakenly had the idea that church people were women and guys that weren't athletes. I mean, I don't know why I thought that. I grew up in a small town in New York, and that's what I thought the church people were. I have no idea where that came from. So that's why I love the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, because one of the things we promote in the things we do is that, Mike Singletary's a man. You tell him he's not. Okay? And Tony Dungy's a man. You tell him he's not. And Adam Wainwright's a man. You tell him so you can be a man and love sport, and that's just such a full circle thing for me to be able to realize that you can compete in a godly way, you can coach in a godly way. And so the humility part I get because of my athletic background. In fact, I got to say, I'm assuming I'm the only person in this room who gave up a home run on his first pitch in the big leagues. Is that right? Anybody else? Yeah, I did. I gave up a home run on my very first pitch to Jeffrey Leonard for the Giants. And not like I still feel that or remember it or anything, but I kind of do. So the second pitch, I decided to get tricky. I threw him a slider, and Chili Davis hit a double. So I'd thrown 2 pitches and given up 6 total bases. And I remember walking onto the back of the mound, rubbing up another baseball, thinking, I am going to be the worst pitcher in the history of baseball. I'm going to pitch, and I'm never going to get anybody out. And so, I mean, I had that moment, and it's humbling. And you kind of, when you're humbled, nobody wants to be humbled. But I want to just submit that when my wife told me no, when you get humbled doing sports, when you find out you're humbled, it's not that bad a place to be, because we all get that. Everybody in this room, as Brett said, you may be way out on a limb just being here. And I'm glad you're here. I mean, I really am. And I hope you'll feel connected here. You'll feel that you're not as different from the other people here as you think you are. That's what I want you to know. Because we're all humbled in ways. We all want to get better, don't we? Even people who've been at this, you've been at church your whole life, you've read the Bible through and through umpteen times, you know you don't get it all, right? I mean, we all know that. So we're either trying to learn this next step by this man-up connection of how we can be better men for God from where I am to where I need to be, or we're trying to start that journey. But it's still the journey to get better. Still the journey to get better. I was humbled again yesterday when a friend of mine sent me this thing about sports parents. That's kind of in the news now. Mike Matheny has a new book called the Matheny Manifesto, which is about how do we compete and how do we act better as sports parents. Okay? So every man that has a daughter or son in sports, I think, probably ought to read that. But a friend of mine not only heard about this book, but went to Tony Dungy's website and gave 10 things that you shouldn't do if you're a sports parent. And I got about halfway through reading these, and I wanted to throw it away. So the first one was, the question is, how do you know if you're that dad? In quotes, that guy, that sports parent. And the first one is, if your emotional state after a game is poor if your kid doesn't play well, you might be that dad. On the car ride home, you can't help but to coach your son or daughter. You might be that dad. You're more into the sport your kid is playing than they are. You might be that dad. Your wife has told you more than once to calm down at a game. You might be that dad. You compare yourself to other dads and you're saying, at least I'm not as bad as those guys. You might be that dad. You say your kid picked the sport that he or she is in, but it's ironically your favorite sport. Your kid's teammates joke about your behavior during games. Your kid's early success is truly because you pushed him or her. Your love and affection for your child gets stifled if they play poorly. And number 10, 90% of your communication with him or her is about sport. Well, I'm not going to tell you what my grade was, and I'm not going to ask you yours. But it's good to get humbled every once in a while, to look at this. My wife and I actually, when my friend sent this to me, I sent a copy of that to my daughter and my son yesterday. Haven't heard back from my son yet. Kind of waiting for that. But my daughter emailed me right back. She said, "Oh, Dad, you weren't that bad." So I'm not sure what that meant either. We're going to get to the bottom of that. But the point is, it's good for us all to keep trying to improve. I mean, I think in life, man, woman doesn't make any difference. But I think we always need to have continuous improvement. In business, in sport, you're always trying to get better. If the Cardinals aren't better than they were last year, the Cubs are. I hate to say that. The Cubs are better. They spent a lot of money on. Are there Cub fans here, by the way? Anybody? Oh, there's always one. There's always one. Oh, there's one in the back too. You're right where you belong. So there's a Cub fan, and you know what? Here's what they do. They raise that hand up there so high, like, look, I've been embarrassed for so long, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to raise my hand. So I'm sorry I didn't realize when I walked past you that you were a Cub fan. And I'm also sorry I didn't bring one of my World Series rings so you could see what they look like, because I know you don't. So, but But the Cubs are going to get better, aren't they? They got some good players, and so you have to keep getting better, and that's what we need to do as men. And we need to, the Bible talks about it, iron sharpening iron. That's how we get better. We sharpen each other. Athletes know that you get better when your teammates are pushing you. That's really what competition's all about. When you play against somebody who's better than you, you get better, right? I find that out with golf a lot. I play with guys that aren't very good, and I'm not very good. I play with guys that are really good, it makes me better. And so it's part of life, and it's part of why this being around is so important. I've got a couple of other baseball things I wanted to share with you. Since it's spring, another reality that hits my life is, and this is more along the lines of passion and dreaming than it is of where we just were, but I love baseball so much. That's such a part of me. Again, FCA is my real heart, my real DNA. But baseball is something that I love. I still wake up dreaming that I'm warming up in the bullpen and they're calling me to come into a game for the Cardinals. 2 nights ago I had it again. Every spring, my stress dream in college was I got a physics test that I haven't prepared for. You all have had that dream, the test dream. Mine actually was true a couple of times in college, but that stress dream has now been replaced by I'm warming up and I can't get loose. My arm's just not what it used to be. So when I wake up, it's not a dream, it's reality. My arm I can't throw more than 65 miles an hour. Actually, I will say, and even said when I was playing, I threw as hard as Nolan Ryan did back in the day. It just didn't get there as fast. So it's not that I don't throw hard, it's just, so I probably throw about 65 right now, but I promise you I could throw strikes. So, which isn't good enough to be a big leaguer anymore, but that's still my stress dream. What I miss about baseball is not so much competing. I mean, I love competing, but what I miss more, I think, is sitting in the bullpen with the guys telling stories. And if you are a hunter, you know that deal. Or you fish or you golf or whatever it is you do. There's just something about guys being together, sharing your life with one another that I think is really important. And I think you guys are doing that here. I got a chance to do that in baseball. I had so many teammates that I look back and I say, I can't believe I got to play with Ozzie Smith. I mean, he was a teammate of mine. Willie McGee, the most humble guy you'd ever want to see. I lockered next to Willie every night. So Willie, tell us about the game. Well, I'm just happy to be here, and I didn't, I just trying to do my best, just trying to see the ball and hit it. And so next question. So Willie, what do you think about next year? Well, I'm just happy to be here. And it's all about my team. And he said that 9 million times, but he meant it because he was really humble. And so that's what I love about Willie McGee. Played with the Dodgers. We won the World Series. That's the thing that happens in October. We won the World Series for the Dodgers in '88. And I was on that team with Kirk Gibson and Earl Hershiser. And when Gibson hit the home run off of Dennis Eckersley, I was in that right bullpen for that. When Jack Clark hit a home run off of Tom Niedenfuhr, I was in the right bullpen for that. I'm in the bullpen a lot, but I'm on the team, so I got to share in the joy of that. So all these wonderful moments, but I still want to come back to the idea of humility. One of the reasons we don't want to be humbled is we don't want to admit that we have a need. That also goes along with being a man, doesn't it? So we know, as my wife said, she wanted to be led by a Christian man, even though she wasn't one. The world needs people of character, which is what they'll call that, even though they won't necessarily define that. So we know that there's a need there. But one of the things we don't have to do to be that is we don't want to just be phony about it. Okay, so when we're growing to be stronger as men, I think there has to be a transparency that's part of that. It's funny, I was thinking, well, I actually will show you now. I didn't plan on wearing a sport coat to this. I mean, I'm not a sport coat guy really, but the reason I wore a sport coat, I had this look working today, kind of this tucked out, I don't know what they call it, but this was my look today. But then I spilled something on my shirt. See that? So I thought, I don't want the nice people of Farmington to see this stain on my shirt. So I kind of covered it up by a jacket that I'm not even sure if it matches, but it doesn't matter. That's why my wife is needed there. But so here's the point. I'm driving here thinking about that, and I'm thinking I don't want to show you that. So in my mind, that's a metaphor for our life. I mean, this just happened driving in the car trying to eat a sandwich while I was driving. Not smart. But the point is, isn't that the way we are? We don't want to show our sin or our need or our problems to other people because we're afraid we're going to get stomped on or not accepted or ridiculed or whatever it may be. But the way we grow and the way this is going to continue to grow and strengthen each other is for real men to have real conversations about real life. And if you're here, that's where you are. If you're here, that's where you are. But we're all growing. So what I want to do is just go through a couple of verses with you from Charlie's favorite book. But one of the verses that I was really thinking about when Brett was up here was Paul in the first chapter of Romans talks about wanting to be with his brothers in the church in Rome so we can be mutually encouraged by one another's faith. Okay, and I want you to think about that for a minute. Mutually encouraged by one another's faith. I think often we think it's one person doing the encouragement to somebody else and that's it, but it does swing both ways. And I think in a group like this, you've all experienced that, those who've been a part of it, that you may have the right word, you may have the encouragement, you may have the pat on the back, you may have something for somebody else, but God has a way of encouraging us in the midst of that, and perhaps that person does the same thing back to you. That's the way it ought to work. That's the way a body ought to work. And I think Paul was trying to explain that, even though in the New Testament, he's the teacher at that point. He's the leader, yet he wanted to be with these young church leaders because they were encouraging him as well. So think about the fact that not only is a group like this a place for you to come get, but it's a place for you to give. And I think we make that mistake when we think of church. Church is a place to serve, not just be served. And I think, it swings both ways, but I think that's an important distinction. So what I want to share just in this manner of the scripture I want to talk about, I want to go back to the Old Testament. And I want to do it by just talking about 4 simple words with you. I always do the 4 simple words here in case there are people that have a football background. I want to make it simple for you. So, Charlie, did I really say that? Yeah, I think I did. It's a baseball guy's thing to say. We think we're smarter than everybody else, but we're not. But it doesn't matter. We just talk more. So, but the 4 simple words that I just want you to think about for a bit is God, man, Christ, response. God, man, Christ, response. And they're simple words, but there's a lot behind each one of those words, because those 4 words in my mind are the best understanding and the best summary and description of what the gospel is. God, man, Christ, response. And if we understand those 4 things, we have a good understanding when people talk about, why are you going to church, or what makes me a Christian, or it's interdenominational, all that stuff gets kind of confusing to me. Or I heard the gospel, but then they said it this way, and they said it that way, and they said it this way. Well, the simplicity of those 4 words, I think, helps boil it down for each man in this room to understand who we are. If we have a right understanding of those 4 words, I think we're on the right path. So it's God, man, Christ, response. And simply, it's God. God's God or he's not. God created the universe and all of us and everything in this, the Bible says he did in Genesis. Either he did or he didn't. And if God's not the creator, then we're going to make up a God. We'll come up with something else to worship and something else to think is most important, and sometimes that's me. So God is the owner, creator. Man is created, according to the Bible, in God's image. Fearfully and wonderfully made, the Bible says. So we're created in God's image. How awesome would that be? And it's something in FCA that I hope we do every chance we get. I know we do it, but I wish we'd do it 10 times more than we do it. If we can get all of the 6,000 or 7,000 kids involved in FCA in the greater St. Louis area to understand that God created you in his image. Talk about value and meaning and purpose all wrapped up in one thought. I mean, do you think most of our kids walk around thinking, I matter because God created me? I don't think they do. I think they're looking to find some value in what they do, in what grades they get, in what sport they play, and how good they look, blah, blah, blah. And, it's not just kids, it's us adults too. We get wrapped into this idea of let's look good on the outside. Let's get the stains off of our shirt. My goodness, I could have brought another shirt. What really matters is how we look. But no, it isn't. But that's where kids are. So the Bible says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We're made in God's image, so we have meaning and purpose and destiny all wrapped into that. But we're also sinful. We have these blemishes, everybody here. You know, we need to be humbled occasionally to realize, you know what, I don't have it all figured out yet. I actually, boy, I'm just dishonest sometimes with my wife. I'm spiteful. I'm you know, I'm a little envious. I'm jealous of. I get too overly angry at, and I want to hurt, and I feel that and all these things that crop into it's part of our human nature. It's who we are. It's our sin nature that's in us. So we're wonderfully made, but we're also fallen because we sin. So God's God. We're created wonderfully, but we got a problem, and that's sin. Jesus is the answer to that. Jesus is death, burial, and resurrection. The whole message of Christ in the New Testament, his dying for our sins, is that third part. And then the fourth part is our response. And our response is to believe that by faith. So that's the gospel. That's the whole gospel. It's God, man, Christ response. But God is where that starts. And I think often we go right to the message of the cross and what Jesus did on the cross. And everybody in this room has heard that message, whether you believe it or not, you've heard it. But I believe the gospel sometimes gets truncated, and we forget to go all the way back to thinking about God as God first, as our creator, because he's the owner. And when you sin, I'm sinning against God. And when we need Jesus to mediate between us and God. So God the Father, I think, is a part of the gospel that's not talked about enough. And you know, the commandments are where I want to bring us to in Exodus. And I don't know the last time you read the 10 Commandments. I mean, you know, Thomas Jefferson wrote his own 10 Commandments, and he also wrote his own gospel because he thought, you know, that was antiquated. Ted Turner wrote his own 10 Commandments. If you remember those in the 70s, he said, well, those are archaic, so I'll write my own. Well, I don't think you get to do that. I think you create the universe, you get to write the commandments. That's the way I'm looking at it. So he either did this or he didn't. And in the old movie, The 10 Commandments, anybody see that movie? Charlton Heston. Now, the older guys are going to go, yep. The younger guys are going to go, who's Charlton Heston? This is one of the top 10 grossing movies of all time still. Is that ridiculous? The 10 Commandments. It was in 1872, whenever it was. But I watched it. I used to watch it all the time. And interestingly, at the beginning of the movie, if you go watch this movie again, the director, Cecil B. DeMille, comes out on stage. It's really awkward. Comes out on stage, grabs this old microphone, and says, I'm doing this story of the 10 Commandments and Moses delivering the people out of Israel, but it's really scary for me to do this because I want to get it right because it's God's word. Now, that's how he starts a movie. Now, that ain't working anymore in Hollywood. They're not doing that I know of. But this was the number one movie of the time, and Cecil B. DeMille said that he was concerned about getting it right, and he was concerned about getting it right because of one of the commandments. So the commandments, there's 10 of them, and if there's anybody in the room that is good at all, you're good with all the 10, you can just go do something else right now, but I don't think so. We all have, this is the sin part before God. God lays out to us the 10 commandments, and it says God spoke all these words. Genesis 20, verse 1. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. So he says, I'm God. You listening? That's how he says it, essentially. So he starts out, you shall have no other gods before me, is number one. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven or above or on earth or in the waters below. That's 2. Verse 7 is the third commandment. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Don't use his name wrong. And the fourth, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. And those first 4 commandments are us and God. That's what the first table of the law. It's how we should think about God. God's God, there's not anybody else. I'm not going to say his name. I'm not going to say God did this unless I'm sure he did. Think about that. I think people sometimes will say, well, God's doing this. I'm not speaking for the creator of the universe until he tells me exactly that's what he's doing. I may think he does. I may say his word says this, but I tread lightly on that one. because it says don't misuse his name. And also it says to not create any other idols, which of course in our country, we know what idols are, and we know what idols we follow, and TV, and it's entertainment, and it's sports. And sports is a terrible god. Think about that. Sports is a terrible god. I mean, boy, you love the Cardinals, and then they have a bad week. Oh, I hate the Cardinals. and I mean, honestly, or a great player, and then 5 years later you go, who's that? I don't remember him. And so Isaiah talks a lot about idols, and what we do is we worship an idol, and Isaiah does it great. He says, we worship an idol that cannot speak, and it's an idol carved by men, and we put it on the throne, and it just sits there. That's kind of paraphrased. That's what he says. Then the people expect the idol to do something, and it can't because it has no power. It's not really God. And then we judge the idol. Then the people judge it. So they make it an idol, then they judge it, which I see happening with athletes all the time. When an athlete falls, boy, we jump right on that bandwagon. And we're just ready to just kind of dog that guy after we've raised him up to be somebody that we want our kids to be like. So the idolatry is certainly a part of what goes on in our world, but it's part of these first four sins that we do, or it's the right orientation horizontally or vertically with God. The next 6 commandments are all horizontal. That has to do with, honoring your mother and father, and it's don't covet, and don't steal, and don't murder, and all the commandments we're kind of used to talking about, I think, about stealing. We're thinking we spend so much time thinking about those that I think we miss the first 4. That's the point I want to make. If God's in the right spot, I think that helps us with the other ones. If we recognize in this group that you want to be more like men, I think it first starts with us recognizing that God is who he said he is. God the Father, because that's who I'm honoring, that's who I'm pleasing, that's who is commanding me, not suggesting. Now, we're not going to be perfect with this. None of us are. That's why we need Jesus. That's the gospel. That's the reconciliation back to the Father. So my encouragement for everybody here is, as we think about trying to be more like men, let's not truncate that process too by just making it a behavioral thing. I think anybody here, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a physiologist, I'm not any kind of ologist. I guess I'm a baseball cardinalologist or something. I mean, I know a little bit about that. But I do know that, that actions and words that come out of our mouths, we always try to change those things and try to be better at those things, New Year's resolutions. Those are the overflow of our heart. It comes out of the overflow of our heart. It comes out of the way we think. Now, I happen to think our heart, I'm not a physiologist, as I said, I think our heart is really here. This is a heart, this is the organ, but our seat of emotion is actually in our brain. So how we think and how we feel emanates in our head. I think thoughts can relate to our feelings, and then those feelings and thoughts turn into words and action. And how we think in our brain and how we feel in our brain can be dictated by us allowing God to transform us. That's what the Bible talks about, the renewing of our mind. If we renew our mind, then our thoughts, then our feelings create different actions and different words from our mouth. I played with a guy for the Cardinals. I still can't believe this. He's a coach now. I actually argued with him in the bullpen one day because he told me he has never said a cuss word in his life. So, I mean, a great Christian friend, brother, his name's Lee Tunnell, and he wasn't being prideful about it. Somebody teased him and said, well, Lee, why don't you cuss? And he goes, no, I don't do that. And I said, well, you had to have done it before. And he said, no, never. So, I mean, he wasn't like Willie McGee. No, I never have. So, I mean, he was being humble about it. So then I said, okay, Lee, you got it. So I know the Bible enough to know that you got it in your brain. It's like doing it. Okay. So you thought it, you just didn't say it. He goes, no, don't really think it in my head either. So honestly, that can't be, but I trust him. I believe him. So he's either lied about 7 times and cussed or didn't, but I think the reality is he was able to do that. He was just a wonderful Christian brother. And I know that he had a regular daily renewal of his mind through Bible study and through worship and prayer, and that's who he was, and that's who he is. He's a coach in the big leagues still. And so I was always kind of looking to that and saying, man, that's somebody I want to be like. Now, I'm not comparing him as if I'm not worthy because I'm not exactly the same as him, but we all want to shoot for being better, don't we? I mean, we all do. That's part of our makeup, is I want to be more of a man tomorrow than I am today. And I want to be more of a man a year from now than I am today. And how do I do that? And I think models have something to do with that. But I also think we've got to start with renewing our mind. And renewing our mind is understanding God is God, and I'm not. And when it starts there, the actions can follow. I had when I was in a chapel meeting at Shea Stadium years and years ago, there was a guy who just come off the mission field who was doing a chapel for us on a Sunday morning before we played the Mets. Doing a chapel before you played the Mets back then was a necessity because we weren't really too happy with each other, and you got to get your heart right when you compete sometimes, you know what I mean? So we had this little tussle with the Mets a lot, and so we're in a chapel, and this missionary, he told two stories. He told the story of how they would catch, in the tribe that he was visiting, how they would catch monkeys. And perhaps you've heard this story. What they would do is they would put the monkey's favorite food in a big, huge, hollowed out log. They'd cut this log, and it would be hollowed out, and it would be hollowed out so that the monkey would put their hand in that to grab the food, and they'd make a fist, and they couldn't get the fist out. And the log kept them from moving. And that's how, now I'm not suggesting we go out and catch monkeys and eat monkeys. I'm just saying, this is what this guy was telling the story about, and it's frankly pretty gross story. But his point was this: the monkey at any time could have let go of the problem that they had and ran. But because they so grabbed on to what they wanted, they weren't able to let go and be free. And I think the point is, so that entanglement is what sin does to us when we grab it and don't let go and don't say, you know what, I'm going to be freer without it. We think we need it. The monkey, I got to have that food. I got to have it. I got to do that thing. But what it did is it trapped the monkey to their death. And I think that's a story of who we are. The second story he told that day, and I'll never forget either one of these stories. He said he was in another area, in another tribal area, and one of the guys, there was a herd of buffalo that came by, and the people of this tribe got so excited because if they could catch a buffalo, they would eat for a week or two. I mean, it was a big deal. I mean, they went days without food, and so this was like excitement city. So they sent guys out to kill this buffalo, and they got the biggest one that was out there, this big, beautiful buffalo. And there was joy in the village, and he said, he's doing this through a translator. Everybody's like, I can't believe it. This is going to feed our families. This is going to sustain us. And so they brought the buffalo back, and when they started to carve up the buffalo, they found out that the buffalo was full of worms, and that buffalo was not able to eat. And the town went into this terrible mourning over the fact that they thought they had this supply of food and riches and things to sustain them for weeks, and it didn't happen. And what he tried to share with the people there, and what he shared with us in that little side room in the bowels of Shea Stadium years ago, was that we often want to be this big, beautiful, strong-looking thing on the outside. He said, but when's the last time you checked to see if you were a wormy buffalo? And I didn't want to be called a wormy buffalo. I mean, I really didn't. But I can tell you, when he said that to me, I'd never forgotten it. Because I am a guy, I do TV. So when I'm doing TV, I would never go on like this with this. I mean, I got the smile on, I got the hair made on. Yes, I wear makeup. Yeah, I even do that. So that's what we do. I mean, we got to have the good look and the tie, and it's got to be, and you got to say. So we're very external in what we do in the TV world. And I think as men, we have a lot of external pressure to be the man that we want people to think we are. But on the inside, there are times where we're like wormy buffaloes, and we need to kind of pare that open and see what our need is to admit our sin and admit our need for Christ because we've sinned against God the Father. And so that, again, is the four-word kind of thought about the gospel. And in closing, I want to tell you a story that some of you in this room have heard before, maybe more than once. I know Kevin has. But it's the story of a man that wanted to be an Olympian. He wanted to be an Olympic marathoner, and his name was Ray, and he was a taxi cab driver from New York, father of 9 kids. Father of 9 kids, taxi cab driver. Don't know how he did that. It was in the 40s. I'm sorry, it was in the 30s, 1938. He was going to run in the Olympics, and marathon was a new sport, but he wanted to be an Olympian, wanted to win a gold medal. I mean, how cool would that be? I mean, the ultimate experience to stand on the thing and got the American flag, and I still cry when I watch that. You're not going to tell anybody I said that, I know, but that is a very emotional experience for me to see medal ceremonies in the Olympics. I don't care if they're from Slovakistan and they're playing that, whatever that is, anthem. It's still something about the patriotism of that moment and the joy of that moment for an athlete. I just totally love that. So this guy Ray wanted to be an Olympian, wanted to have that moment. So he trained and trained and trained and trained to be an Olympic marathoner to represent the United States in the games in London. And the qualifier was at the Boston Marathon. So he entered the Boston Marathon with 47 other guys, and he was seeded 6th. The top 6 people would be Olympians. If you finished in the top 6, you became an Olympian. So Ray had trained so hard that he bolted out of the start. And again, there's no Nikes, there's no Gatorade, there's not 40,000 people watching you. I mean, there's just a bunch of guys in the middle of a dirty street running. Okay, that's what it's just. We have to think of a different environment back in the 30s. So, but he's leading the race. He's leading the Boston Marathon. He gets to a certain point. He gets to this bend, a fork in the road actually, and there's a race official standing there. Now, I don't know what the qualifications for a race official for the Boston Marathon was in the 30s, but I'm picturing a guy in the 30s. I picture a guy with a 3-piece suit, a pocket watch, and a hat on, a derby, and a cane. I don't know why. Not everybody dressed like that in the 30s. Maybe a straw hat. I don't know. You know those old straw hats at the old baseball games they show? I don't know. I wasn't there. But I'm picturing that guy just standing there, and he tells Ray to go that way, and Ray runs, and he heads off in that direction. And the race official rechecks it, realizes he told him to go the wrong way. So Ray is leading the Boston Marathon, trying to become an Olympian, and he's going the wrong way. The rest of the pack comes up, and I realize he's made a mistake, tells him to go that way. Everybody else runs that way. 47 other people go that direction. So they run. I'm not so sure Zamperini wasn't in that, the guy from that new movie, movie, Unbroken. Not sure that's the same year, but Zuna was a guy who was a kind of a famous marathoner. He was in that. But Ray went that way. These other cats went that way, and they finished the Boston Marathon. Ray's running through Boston by himself, just running around, realizes something's wrong, starts to look around. He can't find the next checkpoint, so he comes back around, finds the guy with the Charlie Chaplin there, standing there with the hat and the cane and the pocket watch, that way. So Ray finishes the race. The next day, I actually have the article at home, the paper, the copy of the paper, article in the paper that next day. They clocked that Ray ran 41 miles instead of 26. Yeah, he ran 41 miles, came in last place, and never ran again. Never. He'd wanted to be an Olympian, so disappointed by that moment in time, never ran again, and never even talked about running again. It was just the end of it. I mean, he didn't get a chance. In fact, his pre-Olympic time trial would have placed him 3rd in the Olympics had he been able to repeat the race that he did prior in terms of what the time was in London. So could have been a medal winner in the Olympics, who knows. But he lost his chance because he was directed in the wrong direction and ends up coming in last place. Well, the upshot of that story is Ray was my grandfather. And I didn't know this story about my grandfather until about 10 years ago, which was 30 years after his death. My mom, who coincidentally is recovering from a cancer surgery and doing great, and that's heavy on my mind and heart right now as well. Just talked to her on the way up here, or down here, in fact. So, but my mom found that article in a family archive about her dad, and had no idea that her dad, she was one of those kids, one of the dad's taxi cab driver, had no idea that her dad, my grandfather, who I barely remember, was 10 when he passed. My mom did not know that her dad wanted to be an Olympian. So my point is this as it relates to you, and also to the coaches that we heard from earlier. Praise God, we've got coaches and people in positions, in business, wherever it is, pointing kids in the right direction. Pointing kids in the direction, the race that God has set before them, not the wrong race. Because you run the wrong race, you might work harder, but you're going nowhere. You're going to work hard, you're going to go nowhere. It's going to be full of disappointment, frustration, and it's got nothing at the end. It has no prize at the end other than you worked hard. But if we run the race that God set before us, that Paul talks about in the New Testament, that's a race where we're going to be encouraged by one another. We're going to strive, and we're going to compete for the crown, and we're going to be able to say, well, he's going to be able to say, well done, well, good and faithful servant at the end of that race. But thankful we've got coaches like Brian and like Greg and like Charlie that are pointing kids in that right direction, and other coaches for that matter, and the FCA staff like Kevin to help coaches be the ones that stand in the right place. But also for you all together to realize that you can be that person for one another. That not only doing that in your families, which God has given you if you have a family, God has given you the supreme ministry of all ministries with your wife and your kids. That is, in my mind, I don't care if you're the President of the United States or a Hall of Fame baseball player, it doesn't make any difference. If you're a husband and a father, job numero uno, in terms of what, in my mind, what God has put in front of you. Whatever that is with your family, but also with each other, that you could be that guy standing there pointing in the right direction so that you can save the heartache at the end of the day for people like my grandfather. Now, my grandfather lived a wonderful life, and no, he never talked about it because my mom didn't know it. But so his story was not a terrible ending, but it still grieves me to think about what could have been. And I think we need to grieve that for ourselves and for each other, to say, let me help somebody be who God made them to be. And I think that's what you're doing. That's why you're here. And again, I would say, if all this is new and foreign and way over your head, as far as what I'm saying about the gospel and God in your life, it's okay. Remember, wasn't that long ago I was that atheist that was having a girl saying no to him when he asked her to marry him. So that's okay. I mean, I think the reality is you're here, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you decided to be here for this event. And my hope is that you would take steps in that direction to find out what God would have for you. And that's my prayer for this group, that those of you who are strong get stronger. Those of you who are weak get stronger. Those of you in the middle get stronger. And the reality is we're all weak. We all have blots. We all have stains. We all need to know that God is God and we're not. Let's pray. Father, I'm just thankful for this chance to be together tonight, and pray for your hand on each one of our lives as we seek to serve you and know you better. And Father, I pray that each one of us would take a step towards you tonight. And in some ways, and in many ways, take a step towards each other, so that we could be fortified, be mutually encouraged by one another's faith, and could be the men that you've created us to be, to run the race you've set before us. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
There, go ahead. There you go. Sorry. I hope you guys enjoyed this evening tonight. I hope you got something out of it. And as Jared had said earlier, if anybody does need prayer, there's going to be folks available downstairs. And again, you just go down this hallway out here, and you'll find your way down there. And I know Brian's going to be down there, and maybe a couple others. So if you need that. generally, opportunities like this, sometimes Rick could be able to stay around, do some autographs for the young guys, but he's going out to L.A. I know he's getting ready to go to Los Angeles, so he's going to be scooting out of here now. He probably won't have an opportunity to do that, and he usually does. So apologize if any of you little guys out here are disappointed, but that's parts of the job. So anyway, he's on his way out. When you're pulling out of here tonight, please be careful getting on 00. Usually on a Saturday night, there's a lot of people travel 00 that don't drive as well. So be careful pulling out, and the people out in the field and the parking lot will help you guys navigate your way out of here. But guys, that concludes our evening. So thank you for being here. We hope you guys want to be part of Man Up. So we'll see you if you are.